Wow. Yeah, y'all ever like finish a chess game and think to yourself like, I'm lucky, you know what I mean? Or maybe not lucky, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm lucky, right? Like that could have went either way. Right. That could have went either way, you know. Like we just got through the forest, right? We ran into the forest with boots on. We came out, they ain't there no more. You know what I mean? Like, we started a race, we finished the race, we won the race, but we only got half our car. Right? Like it is, it's not smooth. It's not like, oh, it was very easy. Like no, ups and downs, detours, hard moments. Shout out to Roger, by the way, if you're watching for that car reference. But yeah, I mean, yeah, just wow, tough game. This game, that there's moments where the computer's recommending moves, and I don't know what's happening. Okay, so I'm just letting you know that beforehand. But let's get into this one. Okay, I'm going into this game 3-0. I'm going up against my good friend Carlos, who is 2.5 out of 3. Currently tied for second in the tournament, and I'm in clear first. So yeah, I mean, if I can win this game, I'm going to head into day 2 with a 4-point score and the really the clear lead. But if I lose this, I'm going to drop down to second place. Okay, if not third, right? Tied for third. So yeah, I mean, this is a big game here. Carlos, very strong player. I knew that this would be a tough one. I play this move of G3. Bishop G2, D3. Y'all know what I'm about to play. E3, H5 here. So yeah, very aggressive play here from Carlos in terms of taking space. Now, what is the upside of playing this for black? Well, the upside is that black is, making space, looking at potential H4 moves. The downside for black is that G5 is a little bit weak now, right? G5 and E5 are already standing out as potential outposts, especially for my knight on G1. Okay, I play this move H3. Whole idea being that if you want to play H4, I'll just push. Right, I'm just going to lock things up there. We see this move of Bishop F5. I continue with knight E2, B3, fianchetto my second bishop, A5. I play A3. Right now we have A4. Carlos expanding on the A file as well. And here I played B4 pretty quickly. C5. I took a bit of time here. I thought about this move of B5 for quite a bit, but it just felt like that pawn was a little bit loose, a little bit of a target, and black there with very solid presence on the C&D file. So I ended up going, okay, I'm going to take off that pawn, and we see the move of knight takes here. When I started playing the Hippo, I probably would have pretty quickly just played a move like knight d2, and I was thinking about playing it in this game, but I was not big on this move of bishop takes d3. Okay, this does not look fun to me, because if we take, the knight captures back with check, and we lose our bishop on b2. Apparently, according to the engine, this is like dead even. I don't, I guess when you really start analyzing it, it's like white gets some compensation. But looking at it from a distance, going down literally 2 points, this just didn't look fun. Okay, so, and I don't regret not playing knight d2. On top of that, just by playing knight d2, because of this pawn being on a4, I mean, this knight really has nowhere to go except for f3, right? And f3 is a good square because it covers a ton of dark squares, right? d4, e5, g5, h4. But that's really the only place the knight's going to go. So I instead went with the move of knight bc3, putting pressure on this extended pawn, and really looking at the square of b5. Okay, looking at the square of b5, if I throw a knight here at some point, there's no pawn for the rest of this game that can kick this knight out. No pawn, right? So it can potentially be very solid. Here we have the move of bishop t6. I play knight d4, just attacking that bishop on f5. There's a ton of different moves there, but I ended up playing knight d4 and actually playing knight f3. What's my idea here? Well, black has expanded with h5 and really pushing this pawn to a4. In one sense, for black, this is great, right? They're gaining space. The only downside of playing something like this is that, I mean, really, squares like b6, b5, g6, g5, these are a little bit weak, right? g5 and b5 in particular, I'm really trying to target both of these squares. Okay, we both end up castling here, rook e8. I throw a knight into b5. And, Carlos here, pretty wise in playing bishop e8, just saving that bishop. Why is this a good idea? Well, if, let's just say, black makes a move or something, we can take off this bishop. And guys, this is a good bishop for black because a bunch of black's pawns are on light squares, right? And this bishop is on a dark square. So this bishop has a ton of range and mobility in a position like this, right? A ton of scope, a ton of vision, all that kind of stuff. Black doesn't want to lose this bishop, right? Now, if there was a bishop on c8, that bishop might not be very good, but the bishop on d6 is very strong here. So, yeah, I mean, in this case, if black just gave that up, that'd be a huge asset for them that they just gave up. And in that case, I mean, yeah, I mean, we could even take that knight on f6, mess up black's pawn structure, go in a couple moves back. We could even look at moves, you know, for example, like knight g5, bishop e5, right? There's a bunch of different options here as we really control the dark squares pretty well. But I will say that, you know, I think, you know, just taking off this pawn and you know, messing up black's pawn structure even more, making this pawn on the h-file isolated, this is all good stuff. So yeah, going back to knight b5, Carlos saves that bishop. We have rook b1, just putting this rook on the open file. And yeah, we now have queen e7. Okay, queen e7. Black here just developing. I ended up playing knight e5. The computer actually likes this move of knight g5 quite a bit. And the longer I look at it, the better it looks. I think I should have went with this move. Again, there's no pawn that can kick this out except for a pawn push to f6, which is weakening to black in a ton of other ways. And on top of that, there's a knight on f6 right now, right? So, you know, I mean, this knight's very strong, putting pressure on this bishop, very solid piece. And really, at the end of the day, let's just say the bishop moves, f4 is going to happen, right? You know, gaining space, hunkering down on those dark squares. If something like e5, we can push with f5 again if the bishop moves. I'm kind of a fan of knight takes in terms of practicality. Just a very easy move. You see something like king takes. We have g4 continuing to expand, continuing to attack. And if knight takes, we can either take the pawn on h5 with the queen or even just play bishop takes d5 and white here with a great game. Okay, so we have the move of queen e7. I think knight g5 would have been a very solid idea. I instead play the move of knight e5. You know, not close, not super far behind. Solid move, and really, you know, the same kind of idea. Even though I think a knight on g5 is slightly better. I play f4. Right, so I'm hunkering down on these squares. We see the move of queen e8. I bring my knight to d4. Black here had a brief opportunity to take on e5 without one of my minor pieces being able to capture back, right? Because obviously my bishop doesn't jump over the knight, right? This isn't checkers, okay? So I'd have to take with the pawn. But then the knight, you know, can drop back, and I have knight b5. d6, huge target, right? Knight d6 it's going to be annoying for black to have to deal with that. Right, and on top of that, h5 is currently under attack. Okay, so a lot in the air here. White with a much better game. So instead here we see the move of rook a6. I end up playing knight df3, just supporting this knight on e5 as much as I possibly can. And we have knight fd7. The best move, I keep missing this somehow in this game. The best move is knight g5. Okay, and I thought about this move from time to time in the game, but I just kept ignoring it. Okay. And I got to admit, I made a mistake here. I went against something that I tell my students to not fall into. Right? I did something that I tell my students not to do. Okay, I had a little moment. So here's what I was thinking. First off, I was surprisingly worried about bishop g6. Okay, and because I mean, look, if the bishop stays there, right, and there's no immediate bishop takes e5 or anything. There's some knight takes e7, h5 weakness kind of stuff going on. Both of the knights are putting pressure on f7. There's a lot of stuff going on here, okay? But, at the end of it, bishop g6 is somehow what I was worried about, okay? And when I take on g6, I was thinking, I don't know what to do from here. Maybe black's going to play e5. I don't know what to do next. And I tell my students, don't ask yourself, what do I do next? Ask yourself, how did the position change, and did it change in a positive way? Because at the end of the day, guys, we're never going to know, at least most of us. Maybe I could interview Magnus Carlsen, and maybe he would tell me that, he knows exactly how a game's going to go. But even him, chess is such an infinite game in terms of possibilities. You don't know how it's going to end. You don't know all the specifics. But what you can know is how the position changed. And this changed in our favor. Black's pawn structure is terrible. I mean, you know, backwards pawn on e6, b7's bad, a4 is a target, doubled pawns on the g file, right? I mean, this is just, just so many targets to choose from here. White's pawn structure on the hand, pretty solid, right? It's kind of all in one piece except the pawn on a3, which, you know, is defended by a bishop here. And it turns out that d4 just makes the knight run to only one square. Here we're going to go up one pawn. And again, I mean, just talk about weaknesses here all over the place, okay? By the way, going back to knight g5, a move like bishop takes e5 is a much better option for black. In that case, we can take back with the f pawn, and here if bishop g6, there's a lot of moves, you know, h4, bishop g4, knight f3, a ton of different options here, all of which give white an advantage. Nothing like, oh my gosh, we're crushing, but a solid advantage in the middle game, okay? But we go back. You know, I was thinking about this move for quite a bit, and then I kind of just went, I don't know what to do after those pawns, you know, get doubled up. I'm just going to take the knight. And I kind of just took the knight. It was my fourth game of the day. I was getting tired. Let's just take the knight and just continue from here. This seems like a solid position, and it is solid, but I could have pushed harder, okay? Knight captures back. By the way, if you haven't noticed yet, this is not a perfect game, okay? Now I play knight g5. Okay, knight g5, not a terrible move. But not a great one either. Okay, I played it at the wrong moment. Bishop g6. I was planning to play e4. Okay, this is my idea. I thought that e4 looked very strong. We're putting pressure on this pawn. You know, if you take here, we can always reroute with the knight. Seemed like a very solid position to me. And it is. But then I realized, wait, if I play e4, f6 happens, and my knight is under attack. And if I run away with the knight, I'm just going to lose a pawn here. I'm just going to lose a pawn, right? And going back, I was looking at f5. f5 didn't work. I was also looking at knight takes e6. Does this work, right? The whole idea being if queen takes, I have f5, giving some kind of fork. But then I realized, oh my gosh, queen b6 with check, and then the bishop has time to run away, right? So I did a bunch of calculating, but after bishop g6, I realized, okay, e4 is just not going to work here. I ended up going with the move of queen e2. A little bit passive, okay? I think, you know, there's other moves here that make a bigger difference in our position. You know, maybe king h1 is actually, and some of you guys may be thinking that's a little bit passive too, and that's fair. What I will say is that this king is getting out of this diagonal, and it's staying off of this diagonal as well, which, by the way, this bishop is on, and this bishop can alternate pretty easily between the two. So that's one thing that we can do here. But, you know, queen e2, you know, not terrible. Just kind of a quiet move, a little bit passive, but, you know, passivity isn't always a bad thing. I just think in this case, white didn't push hard enough for the win in the right way. Okay. And this goes back to the mistakes that I mentioned previously. In the game, we have rook to c6. I just kind of bring this rook over to c1, right? I don't want to just lose my pawn to c2, so I bring in another defender with that rook. Bishop a7. I play this move of king h2. Looking back, guys, king h1, much better idea. Why is that? Well, let's think about which diagonal the king is safest on. Well, I recognize that the king isn't very safe on this diagonal, right? I don't want it on g1. The next question is, okay, do I want it on h2? Or do I want it on h1? Well, h2, black can still put a bishop or a queen at some point on this diagonal, and this is what we actually see later on in the game. King h1, on the other hand, it's going to be hard with all of this for black to make any kind of presence on that diagonal, right? So looking back, I think king h1 is the way to go here. And king h2 is played quite a bit, you know, when you look at a lot of different openings, you know, for example, the Vienna game. Or Vienna Gambit, when you look at the Hippo, when you look at the King's Indian defense or King's Indian attack, all that kind of stuff. But a big reason you play it is often to defend this pawn on h3. Guys, this pawn on h3 is well defended here, okay? And nothing's going to try to win that soon. So king h1 here was definitely the way to go. But I play king h2. Here I play the move of e4, trying to break things open. Queen c7, and here I missed an opportunity to push for the win. Okay, I played this move of c3, too passive. I got to play this move of f5. And I thought about it, and I almost played this move, but then I started getting worried about different options. Okay, I got a little bit worried about bishop b8. Turns out we're totally okay against that. after queen e3. But I was mainly worried about this move of h4. Now, first off, what's the whole idea of f5? Well, the idea is that we're just trying to kick this bishop around, right? If you drop back to h7, thanks for the pawn. And if you take, we're taken again, and then we're going to take the pawn. The bishop's under fire. This pawn's under fire. This bishop is, I mean, just crashing down on that g7 pawn. This is a great position for white. But what I realized here is that, oh my gosh, f5 runs into h4. And yeah, I mean, this queen pins the pawn to the king. Remember how I mentioned king h1 would have been quite a bit better. And if I play something like queen g4 here, black can kind of just trade down into an endgame, force an endgame there, right? Queen g4, black, looks to take on g3, trade down. Black has an active rook pair on c2. This just didn't seem very fun. And I was looking at this move of f takes, but then I was thinking, okay, queen takes g3, king h1, bishop b8 looked a little bit dicey, right? Against that, it turns out we're totally fine again because I can take on f7. King h8, by the way, runs into queen h5, and king f8 runs into knight h7. But I was mainly looking at this move of queen takes g5, and okay, I could take, but then I went, all right, here we're sitting at even material. Now what? This seems a little bit dicey based on these dark squared weaknesses, right? But I mean, really, both of these diagonals are diagonals that black could take advantage of. But I just failed to realize here that white, after e takes d5, has a 1 position. Just a 1 game, okay? Because when they take, we have rook c e1, and we're crushing here. We're looking to play queen e8 with check. And, I mean, yeah, it's tough. The best move here for black is bishop e3, just putting a bishop in the way. The second best move is queen e3, putting the queen in the way. And notice here, a move like queen d8, that doesn't solve anything. We check. We have checkmate. That's it, right? But okay, again, I kind of missed that whole idea of f5. I just, I failed to find that e takes d5 and rook e1, not rook d1, but rook e1, thought there. But instead I play the move c3. So I'm not losing here, but I'm not winning either. We have the move of bishop b8. I end up taking on d5. By the way, bishop b8 kind of surprised me a little bit. I don't really think this was necessary. I was expecting a move like d takes e4 based on the fact that I had so much pressure on that pawn. I think bishop b8 here kind of just lets me win a pawn here, right? I win a pawn, rook c5. I'd support that bishop now, right? And on top of that, I actually activate my bishop on b2. Following h4, I ended up just taking that pawn. Knight b6, I bring this rook to e1. Now, of course, we always want to bring a rook to the open file, but I actually had a bigger threat here. Let's just say that, black takes this bishop, for example. Queen e8. Game over. The king can't run. Nothing to block. That's a ball game, right? So I play the rook over to e1. Of course, Carlos, 2100 player, he's obviously going to see this. So he plays queen d7. I play bishop e4, just offering up a trade. I'm up 2 points of material now, so I'm trying to trade as much as I can. Rook e8, I bring my queen to g2, get that queen the heck out of the way of this pin. And now we have f5. And for a moment here, I kind of freaked out for a bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I just lose this game? Did I just mess this up? Because I was originally looking at bishop takes b7. But then I noticed that black has bishop takes f4 with check. And if I take, rook takes e1. And if I don't take, that bishop's annoying, right? And black, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here in a position like this, okay? Turns out, even after rook takes e1, white here's totally fine. We're sitting at even material. I can play a move, like bishop d4, for example, pinning that rook to the knight. And white there with an advantage, okay? But it turns out against f5, the best move here was queen g1, okay? I've looked at this move, very odd. Black defends the rook, and then, yeah, it gets into madness from there. Feel free to plug this position into Stockfish and, just go through the lines. But it's a crazy position. I mean, even after queen g1, taking the bishop, we take the rook. I mean, things just get crazy. So I actually played the move bishop d5 with check with the idea of, throwing in a check, throwing in another check on e8. Whole idea being now if you take on f4, I can take this rook or I can take that bishop, and there's no rook that's going to fly in and take my rook, right? Because before this, I was worried about, okay, takes, if the rook takes, you know, oh my gosh, I'm losing my rook on e1 if I don't take. There's a bishop on f4. Well, by playing bishop d5 and taking this rook, I don't got to worry about that anymore. Okay, but it turns out here that black had a move that gives them a dead even evaluation. I'm just going to show you this line. I'm not going to try to describe this too much because it's crazy. Okay, this is a crazy line. Apparently, instead of queen takes e8, which is what happened in the game, black should take back with the bishop. Okay, this is what the computer recommends. C takes d5. Black taking back. So far, everything seems normal. Then we play knight e6. Okay, whole idea being we're putting a bunch of pressure on that pawn, and if you take this knight, we're still going to have checkmate, right? We have g6, knight g7, right? Rook takes d3, knight takes e8. We're not worried about rook d2 because we have knight f6 forking. The queen captures the knight h5. We take on g6. We play bishop c1. We're fine with just giving up our bishop here, right? We take on f5. And here we play rook d5. And apparently this position is dead even after all of that. Okay, so yeah, talk about just a crazy computer line. There you go. Okay, but we have the move queen takes e8. From this point, white's just winning this. We take that knight. There's no crazy ideas here for black anymore. We have the move queen e3. I play knight e6 now, attacking this bishop, defending this pawn. On f4 twice, attacking the pawn on g7 twice as well, right? A multi-purpose move, and on top of that, attacking the rook. Okay, this knight is doing a ton, and it lets this queen get into the action as well. Rook b5 is played. I gain a tempo against that queen. I then capture the bishop, right? Notice that queen had no way to defend that bishop, so we see queen d3. I capture that thing off. I'm threatening a mate here. We have rook b2. I just take it, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess if I play something like king h1, I could lose this, right? But obviously, I'm just going to take that rook. Queen e2, I drop the queen back, and here Carlos resigns. Okay, crazy game. Yeah, a lot of computer lines there, a lot going on. Yeah, it was a crazy one, but managed to somehow come out with the win. You know, I think I definitely missed a lot of opportunities in that game to push for better lines and positions, and honestly, I fell into that trap of going, okay, well, that's cool. Their pawn structure is worse, but what next? I don't know. And guys, we don't always need to know what's happening next. Sure, I'll admit, sometimes we do. Okay, like for example, if we're giving up a queen for a pawn, we need to know what's happening next. We need to know if we're checkmating the opponent's king or not. But in a lot of instances, you know, if you're just, let's just say you're looking at a position and you could trade off a bishop for a knight or a knight for a bishop, and the result of that is that your opponent has terrible pawn structure. You don't necessarily need to know how the rest of the game is going to go, right? You can just go, this seems like a net positive for my game, right? Keep making those positive changes, and eventually you should have a breakthrough, right? Converting that advantage into a win. Okay, so don't do what I did, all right? And just ask yourself, wait, what next? What next? Well, I don't know. You're not going to know everything, right? Focus on the position. Keep doing that groundwork, right? Don't try to force a tactic. Don't try to force a win, right? Unless you're down a queen or something and you're fighting for your life. But overall, just keep improving the position and things will work themselves out. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well as hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of the chess content we have dropping soon. On top of that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of September in 2023. We have some recently added benefits on top of what we already had, which is quite a bit. And that includes exclusive PGNs to every new Chess Giant video that comes out, as well as a once a month session, in which case I go over patrons' personal games. I'll see you all in the next one.